At 5:37 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in Dubai's exclusive Marina district, the first light of dawn painted the skyline in shades of gold and rose. In the master bedroom of the Infinity Tower penthouse, an unopened bottle of Dom Perignon stood sentinel on a marble side table, beads of condensation sliding down its emerald surface like tears. The bed remained pristine, its Egyptian cotton sheets still pulled tight across the mattress. And in the corner of the room, nestled between two potted palms imported from Thailand, a sleek black, smart speaker pulsed with an unobtrusive red light, recording, transmitting, witnessing. Leah Cruz stood motionless on the balcony, still wearing her wedding gown. 24 years old, petite but striking, with the kind of beauty that photographers chase but rarely capture. The intricate lace of her custom gown caught the morning breeze as she gazed out at the Burj Khalifa piercing the skyline. Her eyes were dry now. The mascara tracks on her cheeks had dried hours ago. 41 members of the Petrov family sat in a wood-paneled room in St. Petersburg, sipping tea and vodka, watching her breathe, watching her break, judging her silence, critiquing her posture, assessing her value as a vessel for their legacy. She leaned forward slightly, her hands gripping the glass railing, unaware of the collective gasp from spectators 3,500 miles away as she contemplated the 47-story drop below. This wasn't a wedding, it was an audition, and when she refused to perform, they called her defective. Welcome to Hidden Chains, where we uncover the darkest secrets behind headlines that were never written. To our loyal viewers and subscribers, thank you for your support. If you're new here, this channel exists because some stories must be told, even when powerful people try to bury them. And remember, hit that subscribe button. This story of wealth, exploitation, and ultimate sacrifice is one you won't find in mainstream media. Leah Cruz was born in Cebu City, Philippines, to parents who worked 16-hour days to put food on the table. Her father, Emmanuel, drove a jeepney from dawn until midnight, his back curved permanently from decades hunched over the wheel. Her mother, Maria, cleaned hotel rooms by day and mended clothing by night, her fingers calloused from constant work but gentle when tending to her children's needs. They lived in a two-room apartment where the ceiling leaked during monsoon season, but their walls were decorated with Leah's academic certificates, testaments to the future they believed she would have. Picture this: a young woman who graduated at the top of her class, spending her days learning to save lives at Cebu Doctors University College of Nursing, and her nights applying cool compresses to her mother's forehead as lupus slowly consumed her immune system. By 22, Leah had completed 3 years of her nursing program, published research on community healthcare access, and been offered a prestigious internship at Makati Medical Center in Manila. She was brilliant. Her clinical instructor, Dr. Alicia Santos, would later tell investigators. The kind of student who could diagnose patients before the attending physicians, who remembered every medication interaction, who made patients feel heard. She wasn't just smart. She had that intuition that separates good nurses from great ones. But in 2022, everything changed. Leah's younger brother Angelo, just 19 and studying engineering on scholarship, collapsed during a basketball game. The diagnosis was acute kidney failure, end-stage renal disease requiring immediate and ongoing dialysis. The family had no health insurance. The medical bills accumulated with terrifying speed, reaching 2.8 million Cuban pesos, Philippine pesos within 3 months, approximately $50,000 US. "Baby girl," Maria Cruz whispered to her daughter from her own hospital bed, where she was receiving treatment for a lupus flare. "Some dreams weren't meant for people like us." Leah disagreed. She took a leave of absence from her nursing program. She sold her textbooks, her laptop, the pearl earrings her grandmother had given her for graduation. She worked 3 jobs: morning shifts at a call center, afternoon hours as a pharmacy assistant, evenings tutoring wealthy children in English and science. But the money came too slowly, and Angelo's condition deteriorated rapidly. Doctors gave him less than a year without a transplant. In desperation, Leah did what 1.6 million other Filipinas had done before her. She downloaded a cross-cultural matchmaking application called Global Hearts. Her profile stated plainly, Nursing student seeking serious relationship. Family-oriented, educated, caring, open to relocation. What Leah didn't know was that Global Hearts had two different interfaces, one for women seeking opportunity, and another for wealthy men seeking compliant wives. The algorithm specifically matched educated but financially desperate women with men whose wealth profiles indicated they could afford the premium acquisition fee structure. Enter Dmitry Petrov, 34, Oxford-educated, heir to the Petrov shipping and logistics empire that had emerged from the post-Soviet economic chaos with suspicious speed and brutal efficiency. Forbes estimated the family's net worth at $3.7 billion, spread across shipping terminals in 6 countries, real estate holdings on 4 continents, and investment portfolios managed through a web of shell companies in Cyprus and the Cayman Islands. Dmitry's profile featured professionally shot photographs. Dmitry on his yacht in Monaco, Dmitry in tailored suits at charity galas, Dmitry's penthouse view of Dubai Marina where he managed the family's Middle Eastern operations. His interests included classical music, contemporary art, and traditional family values. What this meant would only become clear to Leah much later. Their first video call lasted 3 hours. Dmitry was charming, attentive, curious about her nursing studies. He asked about her family with what seemed like genuine concern. When she cautiously mentioned her brother's illness, he responded with immediate compassion. "Healthcare should be a human right, not a privilege," he said, his English perfect but softened by a slight Russian accent. "In my family, we believe in taking care of our own, no matter the cost." By their 5th call, Dmitry was discussing marriage. By their 7th, he was outlining a contract, $150,000 paid directly to her family upon marriage. Full medical coverage for her mother and brother, including Angelo's transplant once a donor was found. Legal residency in Dubai with the potential for citizenship. A continuation of her nursing education at an international branch campus. "I'm not asking you to love me yet," he told her during their final video call before she accepted. "I'm asking you to trust that love can grow in fertile soil. I can provide that soil, Leah. Security, stability, a future without constant fear." What Dmitry didn't say, what the professionally translated contract conveniently omitted from the Tagalog version, was that the Petrov family's traditional values included a lineage verification ritual dating back to the family's aristocratic pre-revolutionary past. A ritual that the Petrovs had updated for the digital age. Their courtship lasted 67 days. They met in person just once, when Dmitry flew to Manila for a 48-hour visit that included dinner at the Shangri-La Hotel, a custom fitting for her engagement ring, platinum, 3.8-carat diamond, valued at $128,000, and a brief meeting with her family where he presented Maria Cruz with a check for $25,000 as a pre-wedding gesture of good faith. The money went immediately to Angelo's medical care. The day after Dmitry left, Angelo had his first appointment with a transplant specialist. For the first time in months, he smiled. "You're saving my life," he told his sister as she packed for Dubai. "I'll make it worth it. I'll finish school. I'll take care of Mom. I'll make you proud." Leah nodded, folding her few possessions into a suitcase provided by Dmitry's assistant. "This isn't a sacrifice," she said, her voice steady. "It's an investment in our future." But in the quiet of her childhood bedroom that night, Leah recorded a video diary on her phone that investigators would later find buried in encrypted cloud storage. Her face illuminated only by the blue light of her screen. She whispered, "I'm not falling in love. I'm signing a rescue mission. My heart is the collateral." The wedding was scheduled for April 15, 2023, at the Atlantis, the Palm, Dubai's iconic ocean-themed resort where rooms start at $900 per night and Arabian Gulf views come with glimpses of dolphins in managed lagoons. Leah arrived 2 weeks before the ceremony, escorted by Dmitry's personal assistant Irina, a stone-faced woman who spoke 5 languages but rarely used any of them for casual conversation. Leah was installed in a suite at the Address Marina Hotel while final preparations were made to Dmitry's penthouse. She was given a platinum credit card with a $10,000 limit for wedding accessories and introduced to a wedding planner who presented her with 3 pre-selected gown options from Lebanese designers. When Lia quietly requested a Filipina designer who could incorporate traditional Barot Saya elements, the wedding planner smiled tightly and said she would see what's possible. Dimitri was unavoidably detained in London on business for the first week of her arrival. They spoke daily by video call, his manner remaining attentive but increasingly distracted. "My family is quite traditional," he reminded her during one call. "They have certain expectations about the wedding night. Nothing to worry about, just follow Irina's guidance." 3 days before the wedding, Lia was introduced to Dimitri's mother, Veronica Petrova, a statuesque woman in her 60s with platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe chignon and eyes that assessed Lia like a gemologist examining a questionable stone. Over tea at the Burj Al Arab, Veronica asked pointed questions about Lia's medical history, her family's health background, and whether she had ever been hospitalized. Lia attributed these inquiries to natural concern for her future daughter-in-law's health. "The Petrov name goes back 16 generations," Veronica said, stirring her tea with a silver spoon. "We've survived revolutions, wars, exile. Do you know why? Because we protect what matters. Lineage, legacy, loyalty." She looked directly at Lia. "I hope you understand the honor being bestowed upon you." The wedding day arrived with spectacular desert sunshine and a gentle breeze off the Arabian Gulf. 112 guests attended, though Lia knew none of them. Her mother and brother watched via private live stream from their home in Cebu, the professional cameras capturing every detail of the ceremony for them in real time. A technology setup that should have been her first warning about the Petrovs' comfort with remote viewing. As Lia walked down the aisle in her custom gown, a modern interpretation of Filipino tradition with hand-embroidered sampaguita flowers and delicate butterfly sleeves, she saw Dimitri waiting at the altar, handsome in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. For a moment, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps this arranged beginning might blossom into something real, something warm. But the contract she had signed in Tagalog had one clause missing from the translation. A clause hidden in deliberate mistranslation and technical jargon, and it would cost her everything. The Global Hearts matchmaking agency presented itself to the world as a cross-cultural introduction service, connecting traditional women with successful, established gentlemen. Its sleek website featured testimonials from smiling couples against backdrops of Dubai skyscrapers, London townhouses, and New York penthouses. What it didn't advertise was its 78% contract completion rate, the percentage of women who actually reached the altar after signing preliminary agreements with their prospective husbands. Behind the glossy marketing lay a sophisticated operation with offices in Manila, Bangkok, Kiev, and Minsk, specializing in what they privately called asymmetric matches. Global Hearts catered to ultra-wealthy clients seeking wives who combined physical beauty, educational credentials, and, most importantly, economic vulnerability. The perfect formula for compliance. When Lia Cruz signed her marriage contract on February 28, 2023, in the agency's Manila office, she was handed a 23-page document in Tagalog. The translation had been certified by a local law firm retained by the Petrov family. What Lia couldn't know was that the firm's senior partner had received a $75,000 consultation fee 3 days earlier. She read it carefully, recalled Maricel Domingo, the agency representative who witnessed the signing. She even asked questions about the medical coverage provisions and educational opportunities. She was thorough, except for the parts she couldn't possibly understand. Section 3, paragraph 12 of the original Russian document contained Clause 7, buried within dense legal terminology about family customs and traditional observances. The English version stated, "Bride consents to familial observation during first conjugal night per Petrov lineage protocol, including remote viewing technologies as deemed appropriate by the family patriarch." The Tagalog translation reduced this to, "Bride agrees to respect family traditions regarding marriage ceremonies." Digital forensics would later reveal that the mistranslation wasn't accidental. Email exchanges between the Petrov family attorney and the translation service specifically requested cultural adaptation of certain provisions that might be misinterpreted by those unfamiliar with Russian traditions. If you're still with us through this disturbing investigation, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We expose these stories because silence only protects the powerful. To understand the Petrovs and their lineage protocol, one must look beyond modern Russia to the aristocratic bloodlines that survived the Bolshevik Revolution by adapting rather than resisting. The family's obsession with genetic purity wasn't religious. It was dynastic. While publicly embracing contemporary business practices and international lifestyles, privately they maintained traditions that would have seemed archaic even in Tsarist Russia. Dmitri's childhood in the family's restored St. Petersburg mansion had been shaped by these traditions. At 12, he was shown the family's blood ledger, a leather-bound volume documenting marriages, births, and verification ceremonies dating back to 1731. At 16, he was required to memorize the family credo. Blood carries memory. Memory carries power. Power carries legacy. The tradition of observing new brides on their wedding nights originated as a medieval practice among certain Russian noble families. Originally, family elders would literally examine bedsheets after consummation. By the 19th century, this had evolved into having witnesses in adjacent rooms. By the 21st century, the Petrovs had modernized the practice through technology, maintaining the tradition's purpose while adapting its methods. A particularly formative memory for Dmitri occurred when he was 19. His grandmother, Ekaterina Petrova, the family's de facto matriarch despite her son officially heading the business empire, had taken him into her private study where portraits of Petrov ancestors lined walnut-paneled walls. "A wife is the vessel of our name," she told him, her voice soft but unyielding as she gestured toward the family portraits. "We must ensure she is unbroken, unblemished, worthy of carrying forward what 16 generations have built." When Dmitri asked why this mattered in modern times, Ekaterina slapped him. "Not hard, but precisely. The world changes. Blood does not. Remember that when you choose your bride." That memory lingered as Dmitri stood at the altar in the Atlantis ballroom, watching Leah approach in her wedding gown. The ballroom had been transformed into a fantasy of white orchids and crystalline light structures, with the Arabian Gulf visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. $400,000 had secured not just the venue but absolute privacy. No social media, no photographs except by the official photographer, no guests beyond the approved list. The Petrov family occupied the first 3 rows on the groom's side. Cousins, uncles, business partners all connected by blood or absolute loyalty. They assessed Leah with the calculated interest of shareholders evaluating a new acquisition. Veronika Petrova sat in the front row, her expression unreadable behind a veil of custom Chantilly lace. Ekaterina Petrova, now 87, watched from St. Petersburg via a private livestream, too frail to travel but unwilling to miss judging her grandson's choice. As Leah reached the altar, Dmitri took her hands. For a moment, just a moment, genuine emotion flickered across his face. Something like tenderness, something like regret. He had selected her from hundreds of profiles, had been drawn to her intelligence, her dedication to her family, her resilience. In another life, in another family, perhaps they might have built something real. "You look beautiful," he whispered, and meant it. The ceremony proceeded with precision. The exchange of rings, hers, platinum with diamonds, his, a simple platinum band engraved with the family crest. The vows, traditional, with no personal additions. The first kiss, brief, appropriate, camera-ready. To any observer, it appeared to be the culmination of a perfect love story. Wealth meets beauty, privilege meets potential. At the reception in the Royal Bridge Suite, Leah moved through the crowd with practiced grace. The etiquette coaches hired by the Petrovs had spent the previous 2 weeks drilling her on everything from proper champagne glass handling to conversation topics appropriate for various levels of family hierarchy. She smiled, thanked guests for coming, accepted congratulations in 3 languages. Meanwhile, in a secured suite 3 floors above, a technical team completed final adjustments to the systems installed in the honeymoon penthouse. 6 ultra-high-definition cameras with low-light capabilities. Studio-quality audio capture. Encrypted streaming to a private server with geolocated access restrictions. A 3-second delay to prevent transmission glitches. At the Petrov family estate outside St. Petersburg, a viewing room had been prepared. Damask wallpaper, leather armchairs arranged in tiered rows, a projection system with multiple viewing angles available, refreshments laid out on silver trays, programs printed on heavyweight cardstock listing the names of family members cleared for attendance. Back at the reception, Leah found a moment of solitude on the terrace overlooking the Gulf. The weight of the day, of her decision, of her sacrifice, pressed against her chest. But she reminded herself why she had agreed to this arrangement. Angelo's transplant was scheduled for next month. Her mother had started a promising new treatment protocol. The first installment of the contract payment had already transformed her family's circumstances. She was startled from her thoughts by the appearance of Mikhail Petrov, Dmitri's cousin and the family's legal counsel. Tall and thin with the same sharp cheekbones that characterized the Petrov men, he carried 2 glasses of champagne. "A toast to our newest family member," he said, handing her a glass. His English carried the polished accent of European boarding schools and American universities. They clinked glasses. Mikhail studied her with the detached interest of someone examining an unusual specimen. "You've made quite an impression," he said. "My grandmother is particularly interested in your academic background. Medical knowledge is valued in our family." "Thank you," Leah replied carefully. "I hope to continue my nursing studies eventually." Mikhail smiled, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, after you've settled into your new role." He checked his watch. A Patek Philippe worth more than her entire family's annual income. "The night is young. The stream goes live at midnight. Don't disappoint us." Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, disappearing back into the crowd of guests. Across the room, she caught Dmitri's eye. He was speaking with a group of business associates, but for an instant, she saw him tense. Something passed over his face. Worry? Resignation? She couldn't be sure. She attributed his reaction to wedding stress, to the pressure of merging business with pleasure, to the weight of family expectations. After all, this marriage wasn't just about them. It was about connecting histories, futures, legacies. At 11:30 p.m., the wedding planner appeared at Leah's side to escort her to the honeymoon suite. "Time for you to change," the woman said briskly. "Your husband will join you shortly." In the elevator, Leah finally allowed herself to exhale. The hardest part was over. She had made it through the ceremony, the reception, the scrutiny of the Petrov clan. Now she just needed to navigate the wedding night with a man she barely knew but had legally bound herself to. She had prepared herself mentally for this moment, had accepted it as part of the contract, part of the sacrifice. "Your evening attire has been laid out," the wedding planner informed her as they reached the penthouse door. "The suite is equipped with smart home features, voice-activated lighting, temperature control, music. Everything has been programmed for optimal ambience." The woman's professional smile never wavered as she opened the door, revealing a penthouse of startling opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Dubai's glittering skyline. White roses and orchids adorned every surface. Champagne chilled in a silver bucket. On the bed lay a white silk nightgown alongside a handwritten note. "Enjoy your evening," the planner said, withdrawing. Alone for the first time that day, Leah approached the bed and picked up the note. In elegant handwriting, it read, "Welcome to the family. Remember, tonight is about tradition. Dmitri knows what is expected." An uneasy feeling settled in her stomach as she noticed a small black device on the bedside table. A sleek, smart speaker, with a subtle red indicator light. As she turned toward the bathroom, the light began to pulse softly. She thought the hardest part was over. She had no idea the real test hadn't even begun. The digital display on the bedside console silently shifted to 12 a.m. as Wednesday, April 16th, officially began in Dubai. In the honeymoon suite of the Infinity Tower penthouse, the smart home system activated without command, dimming the recessed lighting to a soft amber glow as hidden speakers began playing classical music at low volume. Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet Overture, the selection programmed weeks in advance by Dmitri's mother. The temperature automatically adjusted to a precise 71.6 degrees Fahrenheit, deemed optimal by the Petrov family consultant for both comfort and high-definition video capture. The red indicator light on the smart speaker pulsed once, twice, then settled into a steady rhythm. In the viewing room in St. Petersburg, 41 members of the Petrov family shifted in their leather chairs as 6 different camera angles appeared on the main projection screen. Side monitors displayed biometric data being captured from sensors embedded throughout the suite, room temperature, ambient sound levels, even approximate heart rates of the occupants detected through micromovements and thermal signatures. Ekaterina Petrova sat in a specially positioned chair in the center of the front row, a wool blanket across her knees despite the warmth of the room. At 87, her body had weakened, but her eyes remained sharp as she studied the empty bedroom on the main screen. Her arthritis-gnarled fingers clutched a small leather notebook in which 16 previous Petrov brides had been evaluated, graded, and catalogued. "The lineage protocols are active," announced the family's technology specialist, a Petrov cousin with a cybersecurity background. "All systems functional. Transmission secure." In Dubai, the door to the honeymoon suite opened as Dmitry entered, still wearing his wedding tuxedo but with the bow tie undone and hanging loose around his neck. His movements betrayed a tightly controlled tension. Shoulders rigid, steps too measured, hands flexing unconsciously at his sides. Behind him, the suite door closed with an automated click that engaged additional privacy locks. Leah emerged from the bathroom still in her wedding dress, though she had removed the veil and elaborate headpiece. For hours, she had been the perfect bride, smiling, gracious, accommodating. But now, alone with her new husband, exhaustion showed in the slight slump of her shoulders, the smudged makeup beneath her eyes. "I'd like to freshen up before." She gestured vaguely toward the bedroom. "It's been a long day." Dmitry's phone buzzed in his pocket. Then again, and again. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. 3 messages appeared in quick succession. From Mikhail, "She delays. Is she hiding something?" From Uncle Victor, "The family is waiting. This is unacceptable." From grandmother, "If you cannot command her, you are no son of Petrov." Dmitry's jaw tightened as he slipped the phone back into his pocket. The weight of 16 generations pressed down on him as surely as if his ancestors stood physically in the room. He had known this moment would come since he was 19 years old, had prepared for it, had selected a bride who seemed perfect, beautiful, intelligent, financially vulnerable enough to accept the contract, educationally credentialed enough to produce worthy heirs. "Leah," he said, his voice strained, "there's something we need to discuss." In St. Petersburg, the family members leaned forward collectively. This was the moment, the revelation, the transition from ordinary marriage to Petrov tradition. Some of the older family members nodded in approval. The younger ones exchanged glances, a few shifting uncomfortably but none speaking up. No one had ever challenged the tradition, not even those who had been married into the family and subjected to it themselves. "Is something wrong?" Leah asked, noticing the change in Dmitry's demeanor. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it this time, but his eyes flicked toward the smart speaker with its pulsing red light. "The wedding night is important in my family," he began stiffly. "There are traditions that must be observed." "I understand," Leah said, though she didn't, not truly. She assumed he meant cultural rituals, perhaps prayers or ceremonial gestures. After all, many cultures had wedding night traditions. In the Philippines, some communities still practiced the ritual of hanging the bedsheet afterward, though in her educated, urban family such customs were considered antiquated. "You need to change now," Dmitry said, gesturing toward the white silk nightgown laid out on the bed. "It's midnight. Everything is ready." Something in his tone caused a flicker of unease to pass through Leah. The nightgown on the bed suddenly seemed less like wedding attire and more like a costume for a performance she hadn't agreed to give. "I'd prefer to shower first," she said, moving toward the bathroom. "I'll only be a few minutes." Dmitry stepped into her path, his face tightening. His phone vibrated continuously now, messages flooding in from the viewing room in St. Petersburg. The tension that had been building in him for hours, for weeks, for years really, ever since his grandmother had explained what would be expected of him when he eventually married, finally snapped. "Take it off," he said, his voice low and strained. Now, they're watching. Leah froze. What? The dress. Take it off. Put on the nightgown. His eyes darted to the smart speaker, then to a nearly invisible lens embedded in the ceiling light fixture. They're watching. All of them. The whole family. The bottom dropped out of Leah's stomach as understanding dawned. Watching us. Dmitri laughed. A harsh sound with no humor in it. Not us. You. The bride. The vessel. The Petrov tradition. He gestured around the room. Cameras. Microphones. Streaming directly to St. Petersburg. Grandmother is waiting. Uncles. Cousins. Everyone who matters in maintaining the family legacy. Horror washed over Leah's face as she instinctively wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling exposed despite being fully clothed. Her eyes darted around the room, now seeing what she had missed before. The strange positioning of decorative objects that could conceal recording devices, the unusual light fixtures, the smart speaker that had seemed like a luxury amenity. This is insane, she whispered. This can't be legal. It's in the contract, Dmitri snapped, running his hand through his hair in agitation. Clause 7. Family observation rights. The lineage protocol. There was nothing like that in what I signed. It was there. Maybe not in the translation, but it was there. In St. Petersburg, the family watched this exchange with varying reactions. The older generation frowned at the bride's resistance. The middle-aged members exchanged knowing glances. They had all been through this one way or another. The youngest adults present, Dmitri's cousins in their 20s, stared at their phones or studied the floor, unwilling to meet each other's eyes. Turn it off, Leah demanded, backing away from Dmitri. Turn it all off right now. I can't, Dmitri said, an edge of desperation entering his voice. You don't understand what's at stake. This isn't just tradition. It's verification. Confirmation that the bride is suitable, pure, worthy of carrying the Petrov name. If I break the protocol, I lose everything. The company position, my inheritance, my place in the family. And if I refuse? Leah asked, her voice hardening despite her fear. Then the contract is void. Your family gets nothing. The medical treatments stop tomorrow. The psychological weight of this revelation crashed down on Leah. Every assumption she had made, every calculation about what she was trading and what she would receive, shattered in an instant. She wasn't just a bride entering an arranged marriage. She was a specimen being evaluated, a body being examined, a product whose value was being assessed by distant strangers. Flash to St. Petersburg. Her posture suggests defiance, noted Veronika Petrova, who had flown back immediately after the reception for the viewing. Not a desirable trait. The skin tone is concerning, remarked an elderly great-aunt. The children will have neither our coloring nor our features. This lack of modesty, this resistance, Ekaterina said, her voice carrying the weight of final judgment. It speaks to fundamental flaws. Back in Dubai, Leah backed toward the bathroom, her mind racing through impossible options. If she complied, she would sacrifice the last shreds of her dignity, would become not just a contract wife but an exhibited object. If she refused, her brother would lose his medical treatment, her mother would lose her care, her family would sink back into desperate poverty, but magnified by debt and dashed hopes. You knew, she said, sudden understanding dawning in her eyes. You knew all along what this really was. The contract, the money, the promises. This wasn't a marriage arrangement. This was procurement. Dmitri had the decency to look away, his silence confirmation enough. In one fluid movement born of desperate clarity, Leah turned and ran into the bathroom, slamming the door behind her and engaging the lock. The sound echoed through the suite and across the transmission to St. Petersburg, where disappointed sighs and muttered criticisms filled the viewing room. Open this door, Dmitri shouted, following her and pounding on the bathroom door. Leah, you don't understand what you're doing. Inside the bathroom, Leah pressed her back against the door, her heart hammering in her chest. Her mind flashed to Angelo in his hospital bed. to her mother whose medications cost more per month than their family had ever earned in a year. Then to the cameras, the watching eyes, the evaluation of her body as breeding stock for a dynasty she had never truly understood. "If you shame me like this," Dmitri continued, his voice cracking with strain, "I lose everything, the company, the estate, my name. Do you understand? 16 generations of Petrovs are watching right now, judging whether you're worthy." Leah turned to face the bathroom mirror, seeing herself still in the wedding dress that had been her one small act of cultural assertion. In the harsh bathroom lighting, she could see every detail with unforgiving clarity. The professional makeup covering her natural skin, the styled hair that had taken 3 hours to perfect, the borrowed diamond earrings worth more than her family's home. "I'm not a bride," she whispered to her reflection. "I'm a specimen." In that moment of terrible clarity, Leah Cruz, nursing student from Cebu, devoted daughter, loving sister, made a decision. With deliberate movements, she unzipped her wedding dress, letting it pool at her feet. She washed the makeup from her face, removed the jewelry, and unpinned her hair. From her small personal bag that had been delivered to the suite, she extracted the only item she had brought from home, a handkerchief embroidered with sampaguita flowers that her mother had made for her graduation. Dimitri's pounding on the door had ceased, replaced by urgent phone conversations in rapid Russian. She could hear phrases like technical difficulties and bride adjustment period, as he apparently tried to placate his family. Wearing only a simple slip, Leah emerged from the bathroom. Dmitri turned to her, relief washing over his face, relief that quickly transformed to confusion as she walked past him without a word, heading not toward the bed with its waiting nightgown, but toward the balcony doors. "Leah, what are you doing?" he asked, alarm entering his voice. She slid open the glass door. The night air of Dubai rushed in, warm and carrying the faint scent of desert and sea. 47 stories below, the city lights twinkled like fallen stars. The wind whipped around her, lifting her loose hair like a dark halo. In St. Petersburg, the viewing room had gone completely silent, the family members transfixed by the image of the bride silhouetted against the Dubai night sky. In that moment, she made a choice, not to live but to disappear. Sunrise came the way it always does in Dubai, clean, deliberate, as if cast by a production designer. On the 47th floor, the balcony door gaped open to a morning that pretended not to notice the absence of a bride. The suite still smelled faintly of white orchids and hotel-grade citrus cleanser. On the bed, a silk nightgown lay like a discarded skin. On the chaise, her dress, clean lines, sampaguita embroidery, sat folded with an almost surgical care that hotel staff would later describe as too neat to be an accident. Beside it, the handkerchief, a small square of fabric with flowers worked by a mother's hands. The stitching had puckered where it had been gripped too tightly. Housekeeping knocked, waited, knocked again. Protocol. A manager came with a master key. Doors have a way of swallowing screams. When they open, they exhale only cold air and paperwork. The assistant manager's report would say, "Guest non-responsive, balcony doors ajar," and the internal radio traffic would lower its voice for the rest of the morning. Security arrived first, then the hotel's in-house medic, then the quiet word to outside authorities that teaches luxury properties how to move. Discreetly, elegantly, surgically. On the marble side table, the smart speaker pulsed, then went dark, as if embarrassed to be found. In the drawer, carefully placed, a printed card with a number for the Petrov liaison. On the handkerchief, ink bled into thread in letters that wanted to be smaller than they were allowed to be. The note was 12 words in Tagalog. It did not beg. It did not narrate. It did what final sentences sometimes do. It turned the writer into a verb. Huwag ninyo akong ipagmalaki. Don't be proud of me. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you already know what came next. The choreography. The language that steps around the body so the story never has to. A non-suspicious death. The phrase is a bureaucrat's lullaby. It means, do not ask what you already know. It means no autopsy. It means the less we see, the less we owe. Police spoke briefly to hotel staff, to the wedding planner, to the groom. They did not seize the smart devices. They did not subpoena server logs. The balcony railing measured to code. The glass, pristine, unbroken. The hinges unremarkable. There was a contract in a file with signatures in the right places. There was a family name that shook trees when it moved through governments. The officer in charge initialed the forms. The file closed with the soft thud of a door that leads to a hallway with no people in it. The Petrov statement arrived through a publicist's email to select outlets. A paragraph that achieved what PR is meant to achieve: erasure at scale. Our family grieves this tragic event. It began, then turned its face. The bride struggled with instability, evident throughout the evening. She failed to adapt to our lineage traditions, which are lawful and culturally appropriate. A sentence built like a cudgel, cushioned in silk. Instability, failure, tradition, lawful. In Cebu, the heat came early that day, pressing the curtains to the open windows with damp hands. Maria Cruz woke to the ping of a message she could not afford to misunderstand. The Dubai number they had saved under Dimitri, medical, asking to confirm bank details for a condolence payment. The figure on the screen, $10,000, looked obscene and necessary at the same time. A courier arrived with papers and a pen. Non-disclosure agreements wear the same gray suit everywhere in the world. The only thing that changes is the watermark. The courier did not sit. He indicated the signature lines with a capped pen, as if playing a game with strict rules. This is where you agree you will not speak. This is where you agree you do not know. Half an hour later, an automatic debit failed at the dialysis clinic. A red banner appeared on a terminal, and Angelo's nurse looked at a screen, then at his face, then at the floor. "We'll sort it out," she said, and tried calls, emails, the entire choreography of pleading. The reply was a cut-and-paste paragraph from an account specialist at a private insurer in Dubai. Authorization revoked. Arrangement terminated. Contact the sponsor. Sponsorship, that euphemism migrants learn to say without choking. At the small kitchen table, Maria unfolded the NDA that had cost the same as 3 months of her son's blood being washed on a schedule. The words on the page made a fence around her grief. She signed anyway. Hunger sits at the negotiation table. So does fear. So does love wearing its oldest clothes. Hidden chains will always tell you when we have primary sources. We have seen the NDA. We have verified the deposit. We have heard the voicemail where Irina, the assistant who spoke 5 languages and used none of them for casual conversation, said, in English, "We are very sorry for your loss. Please honor the terms. Further assistance is contingent upon your discretion." You can guess what happened online. The wedding photos, the official ones, never surfaced. The Atlantis had been expensive. Privacy had been part of the price. But silence is never airtight in an age when devices are tiny and people are human. 12 seconds appeared, compressed and shaky, filmed from a TV in a crowded room in St. Petersburg. A cousin's cousin, an in-law's maid, a technician with a conscience. We still don't know. The clip traveled like contraband. WhatsApp to Viber to Facebook groups with names like Cebu Nurses Abroad and Dubai PNA's support hub. It opened on a darkened suite, soft amber light, a girl's breath hitching. The mic caught a whisper like a thread pulled through skin. "Mama, huwag ninyo akong ipagmalaki." And then static, as if the room itself refused to be a witness. 12 seconds can be a revolution. OFW chats lit like brush fire. Women who had folded other people's clothes 12 hours a day stood still in pantries with their phones pressed to their chests. Men working night shifts on construction sites pressed play and didn't blink. Comments multiplied under the shaky upload. Hindi ka dapat nagsabay in ganyan. Anak. We are proud of you anyway. Sino ang gumawa nito? Who did this? Who watched? Who stood in that wood-paneled room and graded a human life? We have a copy of the clip. We will not show it here. We will not become another viewing room. In Dubai, requests for reopening the case met the same chorus of apologies that doesn't change anything. The file was tidy. The room met code. The autopsy that could have asked questions about sedatives, about the length of time a body spends arguing with gravity, about the last minerals in a person's blood, never happened. The official word was what it always is: tragedy, personal, private. A police spokesperson wrote that no evidence of criminality had been established and that cultural and familial traditions do not, in themselves, constitute legal violations. Read that last part twice. Tradition is a frequently issued passport through the checkpoint of consequence. The Russian embassy's statement, sent 2 days later, was shorter and colder. A private family matter arising from cultural misunderstandings. They offered consular assistance to the Petrovs if required. They offered nothing to the dead. Global Hearts performed its own small vanishing act. Leah's profile, the smiling photo on a Cebu beach, the line about nursing school, the careful promise of being family-oriented, disappeared. Her chat logs, her contracts, her evaluations by the agency's compatibility team, work product that had once been monetized, went dark. When a Manila-based reporter asked to speak to a representative, the receptionist said the office had moved. The door at the listed address was locked. The neighbor said the men came at night and took the computers. Manila has learned to read departures by the weight of the boxes. For a while, even the hotel tried to pretend at neutrality. A condolence arrangement appeared in the lobby. White lilies in a silver urn. A note signed only management. Staff were instructed to avoid speculation. The smart speaker in the suite went to storage. The cameras, if you know how to look for them, had already been removed. A new couple checked in. The orchids were refreshed. The city continued to glitter like a lie told convincingly. But grief is work, and work leaves evidence too. In Cebu, neighbors brought food because that is what you do when the house next door cannot cook for itself. The church added Leah's name to the intentions read on Sunday, and the man at the microphone mispronounced it because he had never met her. At the dialysis clinic, Angelo sat with his hands folded as if this were a test he could study for. The clinic's administrator called, then called again. Dimitri's number went to voicemail. Irina's line answered on the first ring and said, "We will reconsider if the mother refrains from speaking." The mother refrained for 24 hours, then 48. On day 3, she went to the barangay hall and told the woman at the desk that she wanted to complain about something the desk could not hold. We spoke to one of Leah's professors, Dr. Santos, the clinician who had called her brilliant. She told us about a girl who could find a vein in a child's arm on the first try, who could hear a murmur through an old stethoscope as if the device remembered being new. She kept a list of things to do when she graduated, Dr. Santos said. None of them were for herself. We spoke to a cleaner at the hotel, off the record, in an alley behind the staff entrance, as deliveries arrived and departures were loaded into vans. Her dress, the woman said, was folded the way you fold a flag, like goodbye learned in advance. We reached out to the Dubai firm that installed home enhancement technologies in elite residences. The man who answered insisted the devices were for ambience and safety, and that they followed all laws. When we asked if their systems could stream to a private theater in St. Petersburg, he hung up. Later, an email arrived from a general address. We do not comment on client configurations. Meanwhile, the 12 seconds grew into an ecosystem. Anonymous accounts posted explainer threads. How contracts translate dishonor into fine print. How agencies pair asymmetric matches using weighted algorithms that assign points to docility and debt. How lineage rituals are rebadged in tech because cameras are less messy than sheets. The hashtag Huwag Ninyong Ipagmalaki did not trend on global platforms. Algorithms do not like Tagalog unless it is accompanied by dancing. But in the places where OFWs live online, the private groups, the pin notes, the phrase became a prayer. We will be proud for you. We will be loud for you because you could not be. A small crowd gathered outside a consulate, the Philippine one, not the Russian, carrying printouts of Leah's face and candles protected from the wind by paper cups. The security guards asked them to move along. They did a few steps at a time and then came back. That is how pressure is applied in cities designed to resist it. Not with a roar, but with a persistence that embarrasses. A lawyer in Makati filed a petition asking the Department of Migrant Workers to investigate Global Hearts and its affiliates. He cited systemic fraud through mistranslation. The petition sat for a while in a tray that already had documents in it. When it moved, It moved because someone called a friend whose cousin worked in the right office and said, "Please, we will keep you updated on that case. We know how often paper buries people for the second time." A journalist in Dubai submitted a FOI-style request for the police file. It returned with black rectangles where answers might have lived. Respect for privacy, the letter explained, while ignoring the fact that privacy had been the weapon. We obtained chat logs redacted from a Petrov family group. The phrase that made us sit down was short and ugly. Defective batch. Replace immediately. The date stamp matched the morning after Leah's fall. We cannot verify the full chain of custody for those logs, so we do not present them as evidence. We present them as weather. Why am I telling you all this detail? Because the aftermath is the crime scene too. Because cover-ups are never a single action. They are a method. Hotel memos, police boilerplate, press releases, NDAs, auto debits that stop, profiles that vanish, devices that go to storage, women who learn to say new words for old harms. This is what silence looks like at scale. Neat, timed, multilingual. And yet, a handkerchief with 12 words. A whisper caught by a microphone not designed for mercy. A nurse who refuses to look away from a screen. A neighbor who brings rice and fish and sits at a table where the air has gone thin. A candle outside a consulate whose flame refuses to die when the wind suggests it. We asked the Petrov family for comment again. A new publicist replied that the family has moved forward in their grief and declines to engage with sensationalist outlets that disrespect cultural heritage. We asked Global Hearts if they would sit down with a camera and talk about the ethics of asymmetric matches. They did not answer. We asked Dubai authorities once more whether the lack of autopsy was standard practice. We received a link to a general policy page that did not mention brides. There is a phrase that has followed me through this reporting. The aftermath of silence. It sounds like a paradox. Isn't silence absence? How can it have an aftermath? But silence is work. It is the emails sent and the papers signed and the boxes packed and the phones that don't ring and the payments that stop and the words that refuse to be said and the ones that must be. It has weight. It leaves a shape. Leah Cruz is dead. That sentence should be the end of a story. It is not, because her mother is still alive with a pen in her purse that remembers where it's signed. Because her brother's blood still needs machines on a schedule that now no longer exists. Because a family in St. Petersburg sat in leather chairs and watched a woman understand something unforgivable and then called it tradition. Because a system built to look like romance functioned like procurement. Because the law can be a wall if you have enough bricks. Because if we do not name this, it becomes a recipe. At Hidden Chains, we end with a question when the answers are performing surgery on themselves. Here it is. If a bride whispers, "Don't be proud of me," into a room full of cameras, and a city decides the lens is more sacred than the woman, what exactly does justice look like? And who, exactly, is allowed to define it? Grief looks different on men who were raised to win. On Dmitri it looked like posture, too straight, as if his vertebrae had been instructed not to buckle. It looked like 3 days of silence in a penthouse that still smelled of flowers arranged for a future that didn't happen. It looked like a tuxedo hung back on its padded hanger as if respect for fabric could reverse time. People called him a monster online. It would be cleaner if he were. Monsters are easy to name. Dmitri was something else, what dynasties produce when they mistake obedience for love. He didn't sleep the week after Leah fell. Sleep requires surrender. He wandered from window to window, watching Dubai replicate itself in glass until the city felt like a threat. His phone became a geography. Condolences from men who sign other men's paychecks. A single message from Veronica that read, simply, "Stand firm." A longer one from Mikhail with bullet points and a list of talking tracks. 6 missed calls from Irina because assistants know that silence is a liability. The family flew in and flew out, leaving the scent of civility behind them like expensive cologne. They did not speak the word suicide. They preferred architecture, the balcony, the height, the door. They had notes about his performance on the night, the way shareholders bring questions to an earnings call. Should have asserted earlier. Should have clarified the provision in person. Should have reminded her in Cebu that this is not negotiable. In dynasties, grief is a management problem. At 2 a.m. on the fourth night, Dmitri opened the leather case that held the family ledger. He should not have had it. It was supposed to stay in St. Petersburg, but his grandmother had let him bring it to Dubai for inspiration. 16 generations stared out from behind names written in ink that had not yet faded. In the margins, spidery annotations recorded births, deaths, business acquisitions, and verification ceremonies. The handwriting from 1893 had a flourish on its V. The note beside his own name, Dmitri Alexei Petrov, was blank, waiting for the next scribe. He ran his fingers down the column until he reached the page that would have held Leah, a space as precise and empty as a held breath. He imagined writing, Leah Cruz, worthy. He didn't. He closed the book and put it back in its case, the way a child replaces a toy before anyone can see it's been touched. Flashback has its own smell. For Dmitri, it was beeswax and cold marble. He was 7 the first time his grandmother corrected weakness she could not abide. He had cried when a stable hand smacked a foal for shying. Ekaterina had summoned him to her study and pointed at a bruise on his cheek from a fall. Pain is a teacher, she said. It does not require commentary. She made him stand with his nose against the wall for 1 hour. He remembered the wallpaper's pattern more vividly than her face. At 9, weakness looked like a stutter when called upon to recite the family credo. Blood carries memory. Memory carries power. Power carries legacy. He stumbled on legacy. His father's hand found the back of his head in a corrective tap with the precision of habit. You do not hesitate on legacy, his father said. Legacy is the point. At 12, he was shown the ledger. At 16, he memorized the ritual history. At 19, the slap, not cruel exactly but surgical, when he asked his grandmother why any of this mattered now. The world changes, she'd said again. Blood does not. He sometimes wondered if she'd had that line waiting, polished like a stone she kept in her pocket for the day it would be needed. He did not invent the ritual. He enforced it because enforcement was how you stayed indoors when weather turned. If you have never been the child of a system that eats its young and calls it discipline, do not congratulate yourself on what you would have done. The memorial in Cebu happened without him. He sent money for the flowers because money is what he had and flowers are what people expect. A friend of a friend hired a singer who knew the old hymns, the ones that sound like the ocean in a chapel. The live stream buffered twice because the parish Wi-Fi did not understand grief's bandwidth. On the screen, a white cloth on a simple table, a framed photo. Leah in her student uniform, hair pulled back, the kind of smile that admits ambition without apology. Her mother's shoulders looked smaller than shoulders should look. Her brother's medical mask could not hide what his eyes were saying. Dmitri watched the memorial alone, face gray in the light from his laptop, and cried without making a sound. Later he excused the tears as something else. Jet lag's cruelty, dehydration, a transient hormonal anomaly. Men who grew up inside dynasties learned to outsource their own humanity. He wrote a letter he never sent. In it, he told Leah about the first time he felt anything like fear. Age 10, his father's voice rising when a negotiation turned, the way a glass broke against a fireplace without anyone touching it. He told her that he had chosen her because she looked like someone who could survive a name. He told her that he had hoped love might arrive late to a house built for legacy. He folded the letter and slid it under the ledger in the safe, an offering to a god that did not accept paper. A week later, in the same room, he signed a new contract. Veronica sat opposite him, lips that had been painted the same shade of expensive for 30 years now pressed into a line. Mikhail, the legal cousin, slid the documents across the table with a fountain pen that had notarized too many futures. Continuity matters, Veronica said, her voice flat. The board is unsettled. Investors dislike disruption. The next bride will comply. And he signed. Not because he didn't know better. Because knowing better is not the same as doing otherwise when your home is a chessboard and your chair is bolted to the floor. The contract had new language, watertight clauses, a translator vetted by the family, a requirement that the bride sign 4 copies, all in Russian, witnessed by counsel whose retainer could purchase a hospital wing. The lineage protocol paragraph now took an entire page. It cited case law that did not apply but sounded as if it might. He told himself it was administrative triage. He told himself that stability was a moral good. He told himself that one death should not collapse generational architecture. He told himself all the things men tell themselves when the room they were raised in requires a signature. Here's the part where journalism began to scratch at the paint. An Emirati reporter with a taste for locked doors looked past the flowers to the wires. She had sources inside the home enhancement industry, IT men who installed cameras for people who never looked at their own ceilings. One of them talked, then didn't, then did again. A model number here, a firmware update there, a reference to a private theater mode that lived behind a software switch labeled nice. She followed invoices to a Dubai firm whose website sold ambient intelligence, to clients who wanted to control their homes with their voices and their spouses with something else. We've seen the contracts, the service tickets, the schematic that shows 6 camera cones converging on a bed like searchlights. We've confirmed the existence of a regional integration partner who linked the suite to a server with a St. Petersburg IP block and geofenced access. No laws broken, the lawyer for the firm reminded us. Consent on file, words that can be taught to perform. The story ran in a local magazine with the courage to publish it. The English headline was careful. Smart home, dark traditions. Inside, the piece named no one but described everyone. The Petrov publicist called it libel without sending a letter. The Dubai firm posted a statement about mischaracterizations of lifestyle technologies. Then their marketing page changed. No more photos of bedrooms, more of kitchens with bread on counters. Leaks have their own weather. The chat logs arrived on a Monday morning. We were not expecting to be handed a weapon. Timestamps. Nicknames. The confidence of a family who thinks the walls will hold. Defective batch. Replace immediately. The words sat there like nails. A second line. Lessons learned. No more translation shortcuts. A third. Next candidate must understand protocol fully. We could not publish the logs without exposing our source to a kind of danger cities like to deny they still contain. But their existence stiffened spines in rooms where people were deciding whether to speak. And still no charges. Because in Dubai there is no statute that calls what happened to Lia by its true name. The criminal codes do many things well. They are not designed for cameras sanctioned by contracts that were signed in languages the bride did not read. The act of observing could live under the umbrella of tradition if you held your head at just the right angle. Privacy law protects households from the outside. It does not imagine households as the site of the harm. In St. Petersburg, no one asked for extradition because no one had filed a case that required it. The state saw a personal tragedy, the kind that should be mourned quietly so investment climates remain temperate. We asked a professor of comparative law to translate the absence. Some legal systems are built to chase blood, she said. Some are built to preserve money. It is not that they choose money over blood. It is that they call money order and then insist order is neutral. In Cebu, the memorial flowers browned at the edges and were thrown away because decay is not sentimental. Angelo's dialysis resumed. Someone in a clinic office found a way to extend care for 60 days, pending resolution. The extension was mercy disguised as bureaucracy. He began to whisper to his mother about transferring to a public hospital where the nurse-to-patient ratio would make safety a matter of timing. She told him to wait 1 more week. She had a meeting with an NGO attached to the church that had candles that didn't go out. Dmitri watched all of it without really watching. He avoided international news the way a condemned building avoids mirrors. He went to the gym. The trainer adjusted weights and called the routine return to baseline. He ate clean because clean is something you can control. He returned to work. Men in suits with watch faces the size of promises shook his hand and talked freight rates and port expansions and a project in North Africa that needed a partner who could speak both languages. Money and force. He signed papers, took calls, moved numbers from one column to another like a priest moving bread from plate to mouth. He also did something stupid because grief often requires a lash. Late one night, he searched his own name and found threads he should have avoided. He scrolled through strangers' sentences that described him as if he were a concept instead of a man. He read 3 paragraphs into a blog post where someone called him a colonizer cosplaying romance. He closed the tab. He opened another. He ordered a bottle of something expensive because alcohol gives permission to feel for exactly 90 minutes before it removes permission to stand. Then he went to St. Petersburg. The house was the same as houses are when money outlasts history. He sat at Ekaterina's bedside and told her the Dubai press was irresponsible. She patted his hand the way she had patted the dogs she had loved better than most people. "We survived worse," she said. "We will survive this." She did not mention Leah by name. She would be gone by winter, and the obituary would call her a philanthropist because she had paid for a wing at a museum and not because she had refused mercy in her grandchildren. Veronica briefed him on the candidate pipeline the way CFOs brief CEOs. "We've narrowed to 3, she said, "with acceptable medical histories and the correct educational profile. Syria-born, Ukrainian-born, Belarus-born. All now living in Dubai or willing to. The Ukrainian is ideal," Mikhail added. "She understands Slavic expectations. Also, no language ambiguities." He did not have to say the next part. The contract would be in Russian. The witness would be theirs. Dmitri nodded when he was supposed to nod. He thought of Leah's handkerchief and had to look away. He remarried within the year. "We do not name the new bride here. She is still alive, and anonymity is a kind of shelter we can afford to build." The photos looked like ads for the concept of wealth. The woman wore a dress that had learned from other dresses how to climb stairs with a train. The venue was smaller. Reputations require downsizing while storms are passing. The contract was not smaller. 4 copies, all in Russian, notarized with wax seals that would have pleased a 19th-century duke. The lineage protocol clause had citations that made lawyers smile and human beings step back. The second wedding night did not produce a balcony. Compliance never does. The cameras worked. The viewing room in St. Petersburg filled to capacity. Someone clapped once when it was over. Dmitri removed his cufflinks and felt nothing except relief that the machine had not jammed. If you want this story to give you a redemption arc, you have mistaken genre for fantasy. Sometimes the arc is a circle. Sometimes the circle is a noose. Public exposure continued its slow drip. The Dubai journalist won an award from peers who know what it costs to get a story like that into print. The surveillance firm rebranded, then merged with a parent company, then quietly expanded into Enterprise Solutions. Global Hearts shut its Manila office and opened another on a different floor of the same building with a new name and the same receptionist. The ministry in Manila announced a task force with a long acronym. The task force requested funding. The funding needed a committee. The committee needed a calendar. Progress and inertia danced, as they always do. We tried to talk to Dmitri. We sent a letter. We sent another. Irina replied once with a sentence crafted to sound final. "Mr. Petrov is focusing on his family and business and will not participate in content that exploits personal tragedy." We wrote back that we understood and would proceed anyway. What do we do with a man like this? Not a monster. Not innocent. A vessel for a tradition that calls itself survival. A perpetrator whose hands were guided by people who loved him badly. Law looks at him and sees no hook to hang a charge on. Morality looks and sees a ledger written in a language older than courts. There is a detail we have saved for last because it is small and nothing and also everything. The day after the second wedding, Dmitri went to the safe to replace the ledger on its shelf. The letter to Leah, the one he never sent, slid out from the leather case and fell to the floor. He picked it up and began to put it back without reading. Then he read the first line. Then the second. Then he tore the letter in half, then into quarters, then again, because sometimes the only way to endure is to destroy the evidence of the person you might have been if someone had loved you with softness instead of rules. He flushed the pieces down the guest bathroom toilet. The pipes did what pipes do. The house did not notice. In a better story, the system breaks here. The groom stands up at a family dinner and says enough. He burns the ledger. He refunds the money. He returns the girl to her life. He testifies in Parliament. He writes a book called Legacy is a Lie and gives the proceeds to a clinic in Cebu. But this is not that story. This is the one where he keeps his job. This is the one where the law shrugs. This is the one where the second wedding's candles burn down safely and the cleaners come in the morning and smooth the sheets. This is the one where we learn again that a single death is not heavy enough to tilt a table set for 16 generations. Hidden Chains exists because sometimes the only consequence available is a record. The camera can wound, it can also witness. We have tried to witness here. Not to offer absolution, not to facilitate revenge, but to hold the shape of a harm so it cannot be dismissed as rumor. Lya is gone. Dmitry remains. The Petrov name continues. The question is not whether he cries when no one is looking. He does. The question is what a culture decides to do with a man who enforced a ritual because enforcement was the only way to be allowed back into the room where the lights are always too bright. The question is what it will take to make those rooms smaller, their doors easier to close, their cameras harder to justify with a clause in a language someone cannot read. There will be viewers who will ask us to end on hope. We can sometimes oblige. Here, hope looks like an award on a journalist's desk. A clinic administrator who finds 30 more days. A neighbor who carries soup. A lawyer who files the motion even though the odds are older than her. Hope is not the arc. It is the hand on the page that refuses to turn it until the sentence has been read aloud to the end. And the end, this time, is not clean. It is a man walking into his living room with a glass in his hand. A woman he just married looking out at a city that calls itself future. A server in another country counting connections. A mother in Cebu folding a handkerchief she will not wash because it contains the last words her daughter wrote. Do not be proud of me. Let me countermand that now, for all the daughters who have been turned into compliance tests. Be proud anyway. Of the refusal. Of the clarity. Of the fact that for 12 seconds, a whisper crossed an ocean and did what laws did not, tell the truth. It began like most movements do in the archipelago, quietly, with women who had already been saving each other in practical ways long before anyone called it advocacy. A Facebook group for Filipinas working in the Gulf pinned a new post. A nurse in Al Ain drafted the first placard on scrap cardboard from a grocery shipment. A domestic worker in Sharjah set her phone on a flour canister and recorded a trembling voice memo in Tagalog. Hindi kami for sale. We are not for sale. The hashtag landed with the soft thud of a promise. Hashtag not for sale. It traveled in WhatsApp chains that smelled like kitchen soap and engine oil. It jumped to TikTok over karaoke tracks and to X in threads written at 3 a.m. by people too angry to sleep. It was not polished. It didn't need to be. It had a face and the face had a name. Yeah. Within a week, church basements filled with women who knew what a contract can do when it pretends to be love. A parish in Dara hosted a Know Your Rights night where a volunteer lawyer translated phrases like consent under duress into Cebuano and Ilocano and Wari. A WhatsApp bot built by a student in Quezon City answered questions about visas, repatriation, medical coverage, and the difference between a contract that binds and a clause that cages. Call centers, ironically, the first rung for so many Filipinas headed abroad, donated midnight bandwidth so moderators could triage messages from women whose stories were perilously close to Leah's. The movement acquired muscle where movements do in the Philippines. The Barangay Council, the parish choir, the university orgs that grow leaders between exams. Mothers brought pancit to organizational meetings because bodies still need feeding when a system is hungry for them. A law student in Diliman turned the mistranslation trick into a lecture that went viral. When a clause changes its clothes. A sociology professor in DLSU mapped the Global Hearts corporate tree on a whiteboard that became a forest, roots named Cyprus, trunk named Dubai, branches labeled consultancies, and cultural brokers. Then something happened that movements dream of and rarely get. Policy reached for the hand that was reaching for it. A senator from Baikal, daughter of an OFW, sister to another, held a hearing that disguised grief as procedure. The committee room filled with women who had long ago learned to make themselves small in public halls. That day they refused geometry. On a screen behind the dais, a title in bureaucratic font. Inquiry into cross-border marriage facilitation and migrant protection. It was the ugliest name for a beautiful thing. A country deciding it would not outsource its daughter's safety to men who buy cameras by the dozen. Global Hearts did not send a representative. They sent a lawyer who said, cultural misunderstanding and mutual consent, and we cannot speak to specific clients. The senator placed a blown-up print of the Russian clause next to the Tagalog version that had gutted it. The room did not gasp. It did something quieter and more dangerous. It wrote, "Within months, the Department of Migrant Workers issued a directive, a stop order on international bride agencies operating through shell consultancies, with a blacklist naming entities directly and adjunctly linked to the Petrov network." It did not solve everything. Laws rarely do. But it reached into the pipeline and kinked it. Agents who had once walked open corridors now knocked on doors that would not open. Embassy staff stopped shrugging at reports of family traditions. Exit counselors began asking new questions. Do you know the language in which your contract was written? Who translated it? Who paid for the translation? In Cebu, a vigil for Lia became a town hall. An NGO presented a proposed Lia clause, a mandatory requirement that any marriage contract used for visa sponsorship be certified in the bride's native language by a court-appointed translator with no financial ties to either party. The clause would be sneered at in boardrooms abroad. In barangay halls, it drew applause that felt like rain after a hot season. A week later, the House committee signed on. Governments move slowly until they don't. We asked a clinical psychologist, Dr. Malu Reyes, who has spent 2 decades with women who lived their way through contracts and came home with scars, to talk about what happened in that suite. She didn't reach for euphemism. People keep framing this as a sexual atrocity, she said. And of course it is, but the core psychology isn't arousal. It's ownership. The ritual tells the bride, you are not a person. You are a vessel for our name. Ownership requires witnesses. The cameras are not there for pleasure. They are there for proof. She paused, eyes tired. You want to understand the Petrov protocol? Imagine a museum. The bride is an artifact. The family are docents. The policy is preservation. Sex is incidental. Power is essential. We pressed her. Why did Leah's refusal convert into death so quickly? Dr. Reyes drew a triangle on a notepad. Coercion thrives on 3 angles: economic dependence, legal precarity, and isolation. Leah carried her family's medical debt. Her visa linked to her groom. She stood 47 stories above a city designed for people who can pay to be seen. The cameras didn't make her less alone. They multiplied her loneliness. There's a case we referenced earlier in this series, Imani Roswell, the model who was killed after leaving a mogul with a god complex. 2 women reduced to transactions. 2 outcomes that rhyme and still sound different. Imani paid for leaving. Leah paid for refusing to perform. In both stories, the currency is compliance. We spoke to a legal scholar who has represented survivors in both scenarios. She motioned between the 2 cases with a tired hand. The law finds murder easier to name than humiliation at scale, she said. We need frameworks for ritualized violation performed behind contracts. Otherwise, we will keep burying women whose deaths look orderly on paper. You might be wondering about the industry side, how a network that called itself cross-cultural adapted for heat. They did what networks do. They rebranded. Global Hearts became Atlas Heritage Match, moved offices 3 floors down, kept the same chairs. Counselors who had once called brides assets began calling them partners. The algorithm got new clothes. The asymmetric match slider was removed from the UI and buried in a back-end toggle labeled fit. VPNs rerouted servers out of Dubai to Estonia. When regulators in Manila asked for records, boxes arrived with nothing inside but air annotated on letterhead. Meanwhile, OFW organizers did something small and brilliant. They built a witness registry. It doesn't live on one server. It lives everywhere and nowhere, encrypted shards across volunteer laptops. If a woman signs a cross-border marriage contract, she can register a private flag with 3 trusted contacts. It's a sacrament disguised as software. Someone knows. A second tool, half spreadsheet, half love letter, lists pro bono translators by dialect. A third lets any user upload the PDF and receive a heat map of clauses that commonly hurt. When we tested the tool with contracts collected over 5 years, the screen glowed red in the same places: family tradition, private observation, medical fitness, obedience, breach penalties. Not everyone cheered. There was backlash. because power never cedes without a tantrum. A columnist in an English-language magazine sneered at moral panic, called #NotForSale a neo-colonial import, as if cameras installed in chandeliers were native to Manila. On talk radio, a man who'd made his fortune matching traditional values to wallets insisted this was all an attack on culture. Culture is what men reach for when contract isn't pretty enough to show guests. And yet, change persisted, not like a storm but like a tide. The Philippine Supreme Court accepted an amicus brief arguing that privacy cannot be weaponized as a defense when consent is structurally compelled. The Department of Foreign Affairs launched a low-budget but effective campaign. Posters at airports and ferry terminals showing a white dress behind glass. Tagline: if the contract has a clause you can't read, don't sign it. Community radio in Bohol ran call-ins about visas. A grandmother phoned to recite the names of all the girls she had watched leave. She cried. The host cried. You cried in your kitchen, over the sink where you scrubbed rice. Hidden Chains is a channel, but it's also a network of witnesses. We covered the protests outside the Russian embassy, not large but insistent. We filmed OFW choir rehearsals where Tagalog lyrics were woven into Latin hymns. Hindi Kami Pagari. We interviewed a man whose wife came home after 2 years as a traditional bride, in a country that pays better than it protects. He cried the whole time and said, I didn't know how to ask the right question when she called me. We posted links to clinics in Cebu where Angelo finally received a transplant, the old way with donors and ethics and names on a list, not the Petrov way with contracts in a ledger. There are, always, those who will ask what good any of this does for one dead girl. The answer is offensive in its simplicity. We cannot resurrect, but we can reduce the number of rooms in which a bride discovers an audience she never agreed to. We can make a mother's signature cost less of her soul. We can force smart speakers to sit on shelves alone, pulsing into no one's ear. When we traveled back to Cebu to visit Maria, she kept Leah's handkerchief in a glass frame, not as an altar to despair, as a document, evidence that a 12-word sentence can indict an empire. Angelo sat at the table, thinner but smiling, a half-moon scar peeking above his shirt. The dialysis machine was gone. In its place, a plastic stool with a potted plant Leah had bought at the market right before she left. The plant was stubborn, alive in ways no one had planned for. Maria had become an advocate she never wanted to be. She stood beside lawyers at press conferences and spoke briefly, plainly. My daughter was not weak. She died because people with more money than love treated her like inventory. Reporters tried to draw tears out of her. She gave them facts. In the off hours, she attended support groups full of mothers who could recite airline codes by heart. They passed around a laminated card. The Leah list, 10 questions to ask before you board a plane for love. None of them was, do you love him? All of them were about paper. The psychological ripples were messier, as they always are. We met women who realized they had spent years calling abuse tradition, because the word made survival feel noble. We met one who left her marriage quietly and took a job at a bakery in Alsatwa. When the owner asked why she suddenly needed time off to go to the police, she showed him our video on her phone. He watched without blinking and said, Go! Some ovens deserve to go cold. We met a man who had attended a viewing room once as a cousin and was so sick he could not work for 3 weeks. He now prints flyers at night and tapes them inside apartment elevators. You are not a performance. We returned to Dr. Reyes to ask the question people keep posing beneath these videos. How do you mourn somebody whose death everyone is using to learn? She clicked her pen shut and said, We honor the person by dismantling the stage. She drew another triangle, this one upright. Community, law, economy. You weaken any side, the structure loses balance. You build all three, women stop dying to prove a point for families shaped like fortresses. There is one more contrast to draw, because the world demands we remember more than one woman at a time. Imani Roswell's name returned to the feeds after Leah's. Their stories braided into a refrain, both reduced to transactions. One killed for leaving, the other destroyed for refusing to perform. In another country, a judge wrote in a decision that contract is not consent where the object is a person. That sentence should be stamped on passports. If you are still with us, If your eyes have not slid off the screen because this hurts, here is what remains. Leah did not die because she misread a contract. She died because a network decided a bride's consent was a ribbon to be tied after the gift had already been taken. She died because a system treats certain women as infrastructure, ways to move a family name forward, ways to clean a myth, ways to keep a ledger filling with names and not questions. She died because somewhere, someone taught a boy to confuse love with obedience and then promoted him for his confusion. Her story drags something into the light we were trained not to see. A global market where romance is the showroom and compliance is the warehouse. Where love is a cover and contracts are cages. It is not limited to Dubai's skyline. It does not end at airport gates. It wears different clothes in different countries, but the mirror does not lie. Reduce a person to a role and the role will eventually demand a sacrifice. A final word from our narrator, because a show that calls itself Hidden Chains owes you the courage of completion. Next time you scroll past a dream wedding in Dubai, a ring catching desert sun, a gown trailing down marble like a tide, ask, who's watching? And who's being watched? Sometimes the most beautiful gowns are worn in invisible prisons, stitched with clauses instead of thread, and the only way out, if the room refuses to open, is to vanish. That is not a choice. That is a verdict rendered by a culture that mistakes legacy for love. If the story moved you, don't let it stop at moving. Share it. Send the Leah list to someone who needs it. Join #NotForSale, donate to a legal fund, print a flyer, stand outside a consulate. Offer your living room to a woman who needs a place where cameras are just cameras. Subscribe because Leah's voice was silenced, but ours don't have to be. And when you see a smart speaker pulse in an empty room, remember, technology is an instrument. So are we. The question is who plays and for whom.